for questions 43 to 46. For simplifying algebra expressions, we have two sets of rules. There are one set of rules for multiplying and dividing, and another set for adding and subtracting. So we'll look at the adding and subtracting rules first. The first rule that we come to is we only add and subtract like terms. Like terms are terms that are exactly the same. For example, if I have this here, if I have 4x plus 3x, they are like terms. They're both x's, that is 7x. If I have 2a plus 3b, those are not identical, so I cannot add them. I can't do anything with that. It stays the same as 2a plus 3b. If I'm asked to simplify 7x squared y, and it's squared there, and 3x squared y, they're exactly the same, so that's 10x squared y. We're only adding and subtracting the numbers in front of the terms. And one more, if I have 4ab minus 4b squared, those are not identical terms, so it stays exactly the same. So this brings us to the next point, that when we add and subtract only the numbers. We do not change the variables. That's really important. Do not change the variables. Okay? I'm going to give you some examples here. If we have 4x cubed plus 3x cubed, it stays as 7x cubed. So they stay as x cubes. The variables don't change. And again, if I have 5a to the power of 5 minus a to the power of 5, the invisible number here is a 1, so there's a 1 in there. So it is 5 minus 1, 4a to the power of 5. The variables do not change. Now that's for adding and subtracting. Follow those rules and it should be sweet for those. You should get the correct answers. Now the rules change when you multiply and divide. You can multiply and divide any terms. They don't have to be exactly like terms. So if you have 4y cubed and you're going to multiply it by 3a, you go 4 times 3 is 12 times a times y cubed. So you can combine any terms at all. There are no restrictions. This next rule is really important. You multiply and divide the numbers, but they're the numbers, you multiply and divide, you add and subtract the powers. So you're doing two different things because here the powers change. So I'm going to give a few examples to show you this. So for this first one, 5 times 3 is 15. We've multiplied our numbers, we add our powers. 2 plus 3 is 5, so it's 15a to the power of 5. When we have divided, we go 4 divided by 4. Well, that's going to give me the number 1. And y to the power of 5, y to the power of 1, there's an invisible 1 there. 5 minus 1 is 4, so that's y to the power of 4, which we can just write as, there's 1y4, just like that. The next one, 12 divided by 3, that's going to give me an answer of 4. x2, there's an invisible 1 there, so that gives me x to the power of 1. And y3 divided by y3, 3 minus 3 is 0, and anything to the power of 0 is also 1, so the answer is just 4x. In other words, the y cubed and the y cubed cancel each other out and become 1. Remember those rules there. Multiplying and dividing, there are no restrictions, you can do anything. You multiply and divide your numbers, you add and subtract your powers. But for adding and subtracting, you don't change your variables. You only add and subtract the like terms. You do not change the variables. For multiplying and dividing, you do change or can change the variables. Remember, for multiplication, add your powers. For division, subtract your powers. Really important to keep that correct. And for the last bit of this rule, for powers of the powers, we multiply. So what do I mean by powers of powers? Well, here I've got one. X cubed to the power of 3. You just take these 3. 3 times 3 is 9, so it's x 3 times 3, which equals x to the power of 9. The longer way of doing that, of course, is to write it out x cubed times x cubed times x cubed, because it was x3 and we have 3 of them. That gives us x to the power of 9. If you keep all those rules sorted, make sure that you apply your adding and subtracting rules when you add and subtract expressions. Apply your multiplying and dividing rules when you're multiplying and dividing expressions, and you should get your algebra correct.